few weeks ago, Disney revealed a teaser for their latest live action remake, this time coming after the childhoods of early 2000s kids after exhausting their main 90s classics. At D23, they unveiled a very gray and sad CGI Stitch that looks like the VFX team barely had time to hit render.
Look, I'm sorry, but are we not past this? Almost every YouTube video I've seen since 2017 talks about how terrible these remakes are and how audiences want more original ideas. Film discourse has been dominated by the discussion on the over-reliance on IP and the poor quality of these pictures. Despite the cultural backlash, Hollywood continues to rely on these remakes. At this point, I think it's a pride thing, like clinging to a sinking ship because they don't want to admit that they hit an iceberg. I have a theory that these films mostly exist to raise their stock prices, appeasing shareholders who know nothing about the entertainment industry and just assume a remake of a successful film is proof of concept.
Amidst the hellscape that is modern cinema, one film caught my eye. Spike Lee recently wrapped filming on his take on High and Low, a 1963 film directed by Akira Kurosawa about an executive who tries to initiate a leveraged buyout of his company when his chauffeur's son is kidnapped and must decide whether to pay his ransom or take over the company. If you're interested in learning more about this, please watch my previous video.
Wow, an upcoming remake that actually sounds interesting. Who would have thought? But considering this filmmaking hellscape, should we be worried? After all, not only are we in the soulless remake era, but in 2013, Spike Lee botched another remake of a beloved East Asian film, Oldboy. Look, I promised myself that this was going to be under 20 minutes because my last video was super long for me and I'm a novice, okay? I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm going to keep this old boy discussion very short.
Oldboy is a 2003 Korean action thriller directed by Park Chan-wook. It follows a man trapped in a hotel room for 15 years, eating nothing but dumplings, who is released from his strange prison and goes on a revenge quest. This film is stylistic, absurd, and hyper-violent, qualities that have earned it a worldwide critical acclaim. Over the years, Oldboy has become one of the most beloved Korean films of all time and a frequent subject of academic discussion. Fast forward 10 years, and Spike Lee directs a remake starring Josh Brolin and Elizabeth Olsen. Yes, Thanos and Scarlet Witch. The remake, however, was critically panned, currently holding a 39% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, with a similar audience score. It's clear that neither critics nor audiences were very impressed.
So, before we talk about this remake and why it failed, there is one crucial point I want us to consider. Spike Lee's final cut of the film was 140 minutes long, but producers chopped off another 35 minutes, bringing the theatrical version to 105 minutes. This heavily cut version is the only one commercially available. Now, I'm not a director, but I can imagine cutting 25% of a movie would drastically change the final product. Watching the film for the first time, I didn't think it was that bad. Like, it wasn't good and I was laughing half the time, which was clearly not the intention, but I thought it had potential. Knowing just how much of the film is missing gave me a better understanding of why it turned out the way it did. It definitely feels like a movie that was heavily cut. Many scenes feel very abrupt.
There are many elements of the film that are just plain silly. Josh Brolin's friend dies like this. The villain, Adrian Price, looks like a knockoff Hans Gruber. Josh Brolin's wig and beard combo. The part where my laughter became hysterical was when the villain offers Josh Brolin $20 million in diamonds. Like, why not $20 million in cash? You know how inconvenient it would be to exchange those? Is this to make his acquisition of the money less suspicious or to evade the IRS? He still has to exchange it for cash. Is constantly going to a jeweler to exchange this for cash not sufficiently suspicious? Is this part of his punishment? Given how much of the film was cut, it's safe to say that the theatrical version doesn't represent Spike Lee's original vision. While we can't know for sure whether Lee's original cut would have been better, let's not forget that by 2013 he had directed masterpieces like Do the Right Thing, Malcolm X, and The 25th Hour. Even his less appreciated films have garnered cult followings. I don't think he just suddenly forgot how to direct a movie. That said, given what we have, Spike Lee still seems unsuited for this material. If his original cut is anything like the theatrical version, it's clear his goal was to remake Oldboy in a conventional and realistic style. while sticking to the same story. The problem with this approach is that, as previously discussed, Oldboy's plot is wildly unconventional. Such a surreal story needs an eccentric presentation to maintain the audience's suspension of disbelief. By telling it in a straightforward manner, Lee omits the unique and thrilling elements that made the original film shine. Many of the most memorable moments of the original film, like Odesu eating a live octopus, are removed. When things do get weird, they feel out of place. Like when Josh Brolin is released from prison. He emerges from a Louis Vuitton suitcase, just like in the original. However, since we are going for realism, it feels random. You don't question the same scene or any scene in the original film because it's not logical. Time and space are meaningless, which allows Park to strip the characters down to their most cruel, primal, and vulnerable selves. The American version, bogged down by reality, never feels like it's getting to the root of who its characters are. Lee is a great director, but he specializes in thought-provoking films about the Black experience in America, not surrealist thrillers. I'm not saying artists can't explore new territory. The 25th Hour focuses on a white man right before he's incarcerated for 7 years for drug dealing, but that's still a drama. It also touches on themes from his previous films, racism and life in New York City. He has moments of stylism in his films, like his famous trolley shots, but those are used sparingly. The conventional presentation of his films makes the trolley shots stand out, signaling a shift from objective imagery to a character's psyche. That said, the original Oldboy is a stylistic roller coaster from start to finish, and would have benefited from a director willing to lean into the weirdness.
Despite Oldboy's failure, this is still Spike Lee we're talking about. He's one of the greatest directors alive, and the High and Low remake doesn't feel like a corporate cash grab like every other thing lined up for 2025. We don't have many details about how he's going to adapt the story, but we do know it will be transported to the US. As discussed in my previous video on the noirs of Akira Kurosawa, High and Low focuses on class conflict, a subject Lee has experience with discussing within the context of race in America.
As for casting, Denzel Washington is the perfect actor to match Toshiro Mifune's energy. He has the ability to convey deep internal conflict, which is a must for this role. We saw that in action in 2021's The Tragedy of Macbeth, where we saw him expertly convey Macbeth's personal battle between morality and ambition, a central conflict in High and Low. Kingo Gondo, I'm sorry, I got his name wrong in the last video, don't at me, they call him Gondo throughout the whole movie. A shoe company executive who worked his way up from the production line requires a veteran actor. For Toshiro Mifune, the actor from the original film, the role was very close to him. Born in Japanese-occupied Shandong, China in 1920, he was drafted into the Imperial Japanese Army at 19. When the war ended, all he had were the clothes on his back and a few military-issued blankets, and lived in relative poverty until he began working for the Japanese film studio Toho. Part of his salary for his first film was new clothes. 17 years later, he worked to become one of the most respected actors in Japan and one of the richest men in the country. Though Washington didn't come from such dire straits, it's not like he's a nepo baby. He also climbed to the top through hard work and talent. He's been an actor for around 50 years and is one of the most respected actors in the United States, if not the world. He's won 2 Oscars, 3 Golden Globes, a Tony, and numerous honorary awards, including a Presidential Medal of Freedom. If his character mirrors Mifune's, it's easy to see him identifying with a man who worked hard his whole life to get to the top, and portraying the agony of losing it all. Remakes don't have to be bad. Many beloved films are remakes. A Star is Born has been remade 4 times, Scarface is based off of a 1932 film of the same name. The most recent Dune films are improvements on the original, though I find Lynch's version hilarious. The Departed is based on a 2002 Hong Kong film called Infernal Affairs, yet Scorsese improves upon the original. It's longer, but adds more depth and complexity to the characters and the narrative. Many famous novels have been remade multiple times as new generations explore timeless classics like Little Women, Frankenstein, and Wuthering Heights. Emerald, you better not screw this up like you did with Saltburn.
Remakes can be great. You just need to be passionate and present the story in a new and intriguing way. There are also many Kurosawa films that have been adapted successfully: The Magnificent Seven, To Live, and A Fistful of Dollars, though that one was unauthorized and Toho sued the hell out of the film's director, Sergio Leone, for copyright infringement. Rule number one of making a remake: always get permission.